那么今天晚上呢，就也是非常高兴邀请到这个 Kevin。Kevin 自己本身呢，从业在这个辅导升学的这个领域当中有23年的时间，相当的长。那么当时我们感觉Kevin 能够给我们学生带来很多有价值的东西呢。第一呢，他是对中国的学生非常有经验。他在中国大家可能比较熟悉的四中，还有一个比较有名的机构，我就不提取这个机构的名称了。他跟着这个机构在中国辅导了很多很多的学生，所以对于我们中国的文化和中国家长的需求有特别到位的一些 understanding 和理解。他自己本身呢是 Amherst College， 所以今天晚上为什么请他来跟我们分享我们中国家庭不太熟悉的 liberal arts school。 这个liberal arts school 呢，实际上美国当地人有经验的人是非常看重的，因为他们的教育的这个 heaviness 和教育的这个浓厚程度和师资力量都是很强大的。而且相比较一些综合性的大学来讲，它有哪些特点和优势，今天晚上我相信 Kevin 会给我们带来很多不同的 knowledge， 所以我非常的兴奋今天晚上的这个分享那么我就不多说，现在应该我想把时间给到我们今天晚上的嘉宾和主角，就是我们的 Kevin。Kevin, now I finish introduce your topic tonight, and we're all very excited to listen to more about liberal arts school, which is I think it's one piece jewel, kind of made it, not by a lot of Chinese family to get familiar and know about it. So I'm hoping tonight's information, you will shine a lot of lights to those areas. So now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophia. And welcome everyone to this little evening thing. It's a very lovely night here in Portland, Oregon, a very beautiful city where I live. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast. If anybody's coming in from Asia, good morning. Liberal arts versus universities. Which education is best for your child? This is a question that, as a counselor, I've been dealing with for many, many years. And this is my 24th season as a direct college counselor. And I'm always startled by how people get set very much either my child's going to a university, my child's going to a college, and I often feel like people don't look on both sides of the fence. So my goal tonight partly is just to give you information, give you perhaps a bit more clarity. You may not change your minds at all. You may change your minds. You may do more research. And obviously, we at IvyCompass, we're here to help you with this as you have questions and things like that. This is one of the fun parts of our job. I know Sophia just said some things about me. Very quickly, I am from New Jersey, for the New Yorkers and New Jersey people there, and was privileged to go to the Dwight Englewood School from grades 7 to 12. This is a very long time ago, somewhere back in the Ming Dynasty. It's important here because if you know schools like Dwight Englewood and any of the other great private schools in the New York area, in my graduating class, there were 100 students. My average class size was probably 14 to 15. And I was just very lucky. My father didn't want to pay for that. My mother made him pay for it. You'll hear me talk about my mom tonight. She's not with us anymore, but she was a strong, determined woman. And what really hit me so strongly when I was there was not just the great teachers and the great classes and the great academics. It was a very magic word, and the word was mentorship. That the teachers were such mentors for us. They paid attention, they listened, they cared, they helped. And I didn't know at that time that it was setting a pattern for me in my life. As I think Sylvia mentioned, I was very fortunate to, from there, head off to Amherst College. And this was part 2 of that, because as most of you know, Amherst, it's a little bigger now. It's about 1,850 students now. It was 1,600 students in my time. So again, 400 students per year. My average class size, again, was about 14, 15 students. So the faculty became very much a part of our lives. We were part of theirs. And there was just so much of a sense of support. And I remember coming home at Christmas break or spring break at times and talking to friends who were at big universities, and they were having very, very different experiences. They were maybe having more fun because there were bigger sports and bigger parties and a bigger social life, but they weren't getting that same sort of "I see you" from the professors. And I, as an English and French major, I was very fortunate to win a fellowship. Amherst had an exchange with the University of Dijon in France, and we took a French teaching fellow, we sent an English teaching fellow, and I had that fellowship. I won it. So after I left Amherst, I went off to France. I was there for a few years between teaching. And as you'll hear, part of my orientation is I am a writer in the rest of my life, poetry and playwriting. And I was very interested in theater at this point. I'd been studying it in college. So I spent a few years in France working at one of the theaters in Dijon and was mentored by a great playwright, various teaching jobs in between. What's very significant in this list partly is Princeton Review, which you all know, of course. But my mother, when I was home, and this is the late 1980s, this is a long time ago, my mom, Princeton Review had just started, and my mom pushed me to go do SAT instruction so that I would have a job as a writer because she knew I wanted to write and I could do things and make money. And in starting that, some years down the road, after I had been at UC San Diego, where I was teaching French and in the Master of Fine Arts program in playwriting, I would end up becoming an SAT instructor in Los Angeles. And that became SAT tutoring, that became writing skills in general. And somewhere around 1999, a mom was sitting in my office and looked at me and said, "Do you think you could maybe help my daughter with her college essays?" And I had this, oh my God moment. How did I not think of that? Because no one was really doing that back then. Lo and behold, 24 years later, it's my privilege to be with IvyCompass and talking to you. Thank you for your patience with that. Let's move on. So just general overview, I want to really look at the different kinds of campuses here in the US. And I will say I've lived in many countries, I've traveled in many countries. I do think we have more variety than anywhere else I've been in terms of kinds of schools, quality of schools. So we have the small schools, medium, large. I will share numbers with that just a little bit later. We have private schools, we have state schools. We have these enormous geographical differences between schools that are in cities like Columbia, NYU, BU, schools that are in the suburbs, and then schools that are really out in the country. And this attracts different people in different ways. And between all of these schools, we have these very different educational structures that are suited to a very, very big variety of people. So part of my job as a counselor, part of any good counselor's job, is really trying to zero in on students and figure out what they need, each one, what each student really needs as an educational experience. And one of the things that I will say is that I think here, and I think this happens also in China, people get caught up in the prestige, the big names, and they sometimes ignore other kinds of schools that, again, we can argue may be better for their children's personal and academic needs. We'll be going into a bit more depth here. When I begin working with a student, I spend a lot of time, first few meetings, getting to know students. Who are they? What's important to them? Where do they imagine themselves ending up in college, after college, in their lives? What kind of careers are they imagining? And for me, a big factor is what makes them happiest? What the things that they do that are academic and work-oriented, what makes them happiest? When students start to tell me the kinds of schools they want, I'm going to start asking questions about why. And is this just something you're doing because my practice was originally in Los Angeles. I put tons of people into UCLA, tons of people into Santa Barbara, San Diego, Berkeley. And a lot of students just wanted going to UCLA because that was the local school. That was a famous local school and everyone thought it was great, so they were going to go there. And I can't even tell you how many students I put into UCLA and into Berkeley, but I'm sure between those 4 primary UCs, I got at least 100 kids who ended up in one of those schools. A lot of them I don't think knew why they wanted it, why they wanted a bigger school. Did they really think about medium or smaller schools? Why this geographic region? So LA was familiar. Why the programs they've chosen? And so you see this very, very strong thing here. My question will always be, is it a love story? And by love story, I don't mean something silly. I mean, do you love what you're doing in school? Do you love what you see yourself doing in college? Do you love that as a possible life for yourself? And I use this word courtship, and we will come back to this, but courtship meaning it's a kind of courtship of admissions readers when you're applying to schools. And that's the most important part of the application process in many senses. So is this a love story, or is it just, I need to go to Stanford because it's Stanford and that'll get me a job? And I think people get themselves worked up. So I always want to find a balance between, yes, if you love Stanford, then we need to try for Stanford, if that makes sense. But I don't want to get caught all the way up there and not take care of the rest of the landscape. As I'm sure you know, as we do school research, we're generally looking for, 4 or 5 high-risk schools, 4 or 5 medium-risk schools, and then a few low-risk schools, which we hope we don't need to end up with, but we can't always predict what's going to happen in admissions from year to year. So in talking about that with students, and we're talking about that with parents, recognizing that, I've had parents show up and say, my daughter's going to Stanford. That's it. We're only applying to Stanford. And I'm not kidding. I had somebody like this years ago. Like, you can't do this. This is like saying you desperately need money, so you're going to go to Las Vegas and put $100 on a table and bet it. And if you win, you're okay. And if you don't, you're in trouble. You can't put everything into one basket like that. I'm always curious to make sure that their application choices, again, don't just suit their educational goals and preferences. I want to study biology. I want to study physics. I want to study French. I want to study anything, but their life goals. And one of the questions I will always ask is, where do you imagine your life in 10 years? Where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself in 20 years? Where do you want to live? What kind of connections and business and things do you have that excite you? So this is just all a bit of a warm-up as we step in. Some definitions. So I talk about different types of campuses, and you all know this to some extent, but just to be specific. So there are public schools, which are state schools, private schools, and those are divided into universities. What characterizes a university is that a big chunk of it is for graduate studies, not just undergrad. Liberal arts colleges are undergraduate only. In a few minutes, I'll be exploring the importance of that. And just some numbers for guidance. People have different senses of these numbers, but for me, a small school is less than 3,000 students total, medium 3,000 to 13,000, large more than 13,000. These are approximate, but they just give us some points that will help us navigate as we go. General overview. So now I'm going to start stepping into a bit more detail. At moments here, I am going to share stories from my own life and from former students that really define this landscape and help us, I think, to understand things better. Larger universities, and as I say, state universities generally are the largest. And they really are a number of state universities that go anywhere from 35,000 students to 50,000 students. I had a student several years ago end up at the University of Texas, Austin, which has just about 50,000 students. And I spoke to him a few months after he started, and I'm like, so how is it? What are you thinking? He said, this place is a city. It's not a campus. And I've been here 3 months, and I'm still not quite clear how to find my way around. It was a little overwhelming. It was a great school for him, and he did very well. But those big schools can be tricky. Cost-benefit analysis here would be good news. There's the range of people and things on the campus, where they come from, who they are, what they're interested in, what they believe in. It creates just a huge range of possibilities. Obviously, the bigger schools have more majors, more academic departments, more classes, and even more obviously, there are more clubs, there are more sports, there are more activities. There's more to do. There's more parties. There's bigger sports. One of the comments that people come back from the big schools with is, there's too much to do. I can't do it all. Sometimes I want to, and the list is just too long. That's fun, and I think that people enjoy that a lot. If there's some less good news with the larger universities, And a lot of you may know this, some of you may not, but the majority of undergraduate classes are lectures. They're not seminars. If you're lucky, it's only 100 students, but I'm aware of situations at Berkeley, for example. I'll be talking about a student from there in a moment, where she was in classes with 400 to 500 students. A professor would come in down there. You would need binoculars to see the professor. The professor would lecture, take a few questions, and leave. And for students who are happy to sit in the back of the room, students who are happy to sit in the back of the room and just listen and take notes, this is fine. For anybody who actually wants a little more interaction, this can be frustrating. Lectures in these universities have weekly discussion sections, which are led by graduate student teaching assistants. Again, this is kind of common knowledge. Back when I was at UCSD and was teaching there, those lecture classes, those discussion sections would be 25 to 30 students. I've had a number of people more recently in the UC system who have come back and said, actually, my discussion sections are like 55, 60, even 65 students. How do you discuss with that many people? So there's a little bit of a frustration there. And this will lead us to a concept, which is for students to be successful at a big university, to really take advantage of what's there, they have to be a little more aggressive. They have to be willing to sort of go bang on the doors. So one of the things that happens frequently is someone goes in and this professor walks in, gives this amazing lecture. She's a brilliant woman. And students think, oh, wow, I'm going to go to her office hours. If you don't know what we call office hours, that means that every faculty member has to spend 2 hours each week in their office available to students to come in individually. So students think, oh, I'm going to go talk to her and get to know her in her office. And they show up during office hours, and they weren't the only one who thought this professor is really interesting, and there's 25 students waiting. So you're going to all get 5 minutes with that professor. And there's not the kind of time to forge really good connections. Again, it takes sometimes the student who's really willing to go back and bang on the door and ask for more time and want to talk more and want to connect more with the professor. This is a little harder at a big university. One of the secrets in some of the bigger universities, and these are often state schools, but some of the privates have them, is what's known as honors college. And I'll say, for example, Michigan and the University of Washington in Seattle near me have great, great honors colleges where, and in Michigan, the honors college is a separate courtyard with its own dorms, and people apply and they get in, and they have a whole community built around the honors college of people who are just really dedicated to studying and learning and doing their research and developing all of this. They get smaller classes. There's sometimes faculty which only teaches in the honors college. They have special resources where the honors college will bring in speakers, will bring in performances, will bring in things that are just for the honors college kids. Bear in mind, please, this is not automatic. Most of the time, you actually have to apply separately to get into these things, and it can be very, very competitive. But if you have students looking at bigger universities, I would certainly look into that at those universities and see if those things exist, because the students I have who have done this have always come back and said, wow, this was life-changing. Really, really was important. Let me give you kind of two quick notes about size of these schools. I had a student who went to Berkeley a number of years ago, and she went into the field of cognitive science. If you're not familiar with it, it's sort of a hybrid field of neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, AI, computer science. It's just a full spectrum study of how the brain works, how we do the things we do mentally. And I didn't speak to her while she was in school. After she finished, I got a phone call from her. And she was calling to ask me, she was applying to grad school, and I do a lot of grad school work also. Would I be able to help her with her grad school applications? And she wanted to go into occupational therapy. The top occupational therapy school in this country is USC in Los Angeles. Very hard to get into. And we just spent time catching up, and I was asking her about her experience there. And she said, the classes were really, really big. I was in lecture classes all the time. I said, yeah, but by the time you're a junior or a senior, you should be in more seminars, which is what I used to be the case and what I expected. And she said, no, my last 2 upper-level cognitive science classes at Berkeley each had at least 200 students. So I bring this up to say, again, how do you forge connections with faculty? Because in the background, there's another question. And that question is letters of recommendation. And this is something that can be tricky if you don't know people well. If you're applying for a summer program, if you're applying for junior year abroad, you're applying for grad school, or you're applying for jobs, you need letters of recommendation. And that takes really allowing faculty to get to know you. And Katie got very lucky. She actually, at the end of her sophomore year, she's very interactive. She stayed after class one day, and this was the class of a professor who was the top cognitive science person in the United States, may still be, very, very famous man. And she was talking to the graduate teaching assistant, would stay after frequently to talk. And the TA looked at her one day and said, you seem really passionate about this. Professor, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but Professor is looking for an undergraduate research assistant in his lab. Would you be interested? Katie was like, wow, yes. And so she took that position junior year, senior year, got to know the professor quite well. And he did agree to write her a letter of recommendation. She had another from her direct advisor. I was a little worried because she had done well at Berkeley, but she was not absolute top. USC is very hard for that program. And I was delighted when she got it. She did. I spoke to her about 6-7 months later in her first term there, and she told me a story that she was loving. She had been sitting with her advisor, and her advisor remembered, because her advisor had read her application, remembered this professor writing a letter for her and said, you need to know that was really important in your application. That made everyone sit up and go, because he wrote a great letter. To get a great letter from someone, you need to have that kind of access. This is really, really crucial. So we'll look at this at the bigger level. We'll look at this at the smaller level shortly. One of the factors we have to consider when we're talking about being an undergraduate at a big university is the impact of graduate programs. They have a big effect. On the good news level, this creates a much bigger population, a broader population of experiences, of interests, of where people have been. Graduate schools also tend to bring in more special events, lectures, all kinds of things that go on. When I was at UCSD, we had the grad theater program that I was in, and then an undergrad theater program that I was in. And the undergrads got to participate in certain things that we had. The resources were really, I'm sorry to say this, about 90% of the grad students. The undergrads did not get as much, but there was a lot more going on in the theater program because it was a graduate program. This is also an opportunity for undergrads to really just see the graduate study firsthand and deal with that and learn from that. And in certain schools, exceptionally strong juniors and senior undergrads can sometimes get into graduate classes. We did this occasionally in our programs, my playwriting program. There were 1 or 2 undergrads while I was there who were really good, and our advisor decided to invite them into the writing class with us. And this was great to have them, and they got some really special education and experience, got to watch more established writers working and learn from that, and it was something really terrific. It's not going to always happen. Slightly less good news, as I said, professors can be harder to access outside of class. And the popular ones, again, so many people show up. We've really got to push against it. One of the stories I would share when I was teaching at San Diego, so I was teaching in the advanced French conversation program, and my classes were limited to 12 students. At UC San Diego, we may have been the only program which had classes limited to 12 students because I was with them 90 minutes twice a week talking in French, only in French. And this was really interesting. And at the end of that year, I started having a lot of students coming to my office hours. And bear in mind, the rule in the office hours was French only. End of conversation, pardon the pun. But we only spoke French in my office hours. But kids started showing up and saying, can I ask you a favor? And they would do this in English because they didn't know how to ask this in French. Is there any chance you could write me a letter of recommendation? I'm applying to the summer program. I'm applying to junior year abroad. That made sense if they were doing it. Or I'm applying to grad school. And can you do this? And I was always surprised because often this was somebody applying in science or somebody applying in economy. And it happened quite a few times in the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter. And I finally started asking the students, why me? Because I'm not in your area. I can't comment on how good an economist you are or how good a physicist you are. I can just talk about you as a person and how you participated in my class. And some of it was they wanted that, but then the students started saying, you are the only class I have had where there was only 12 people. You know me, and again, we're talking the whole class. You know me on a level that no other professor I have knows me. And in 3 years, I think I ended up writing more than 40 letters of recommendation because that kept happening. And I loved doing it, but this is a slightly downside of the big school scenario. You will occasionally just run against these walls. Other things that are relevant with graduate programs, they'll say the greatest riches go up. So that graduate programs at times really will siphon off resources, academic, cultural, money for funding and things like that from the undergraduate community. Again, sort of what I described with the theater department. We have so much access. There was a professional theater on the campus that was ours to go. And we just had connections on all kinds of levels that the undergrads didn't have. This is a slightly sour note, but there's a PR game that I don't particularly like. Our really famous schools, it's the famous faculty tends to take care of the graduate students, and they talk about Harvard has 8 Nobel Prize winners on our campus, maybe more. Folks, I got news for you. The Nobel Prize winners almost never teach undergrads. They almost never interact with undergrads. Many of them actually don't teach classes at all. They just work with doctoral candidates on their dissertations. So I've had parents say to me, well, I really want her to go to Stanford because they have these 5 Nobel Prize winners. And I'm like, she's never going to meet them. She's never going to talk to them. And I'm saying never, and that's not fair because I think there are occasionally interactions, but some of the resources really stay at the graduate level. And it's one of the small downsides of the big schools. All right, liberal arts colleges. In case you haven't noticed up until now, I do have a little bit of a prejudice toward the liberal arts colleges because of my high school and my college experience. I just had absolutely extraordinary times there and people who really watched for me and helped me. 100% goes to the undergrads. And some liberal arts colleges have tiny grad things like one subject, but 100% really goes to the undergrads. That means they get everything that's there from faculty to resources, to research, to their libraries, to summer opportunity. They're not competing with the graduates. And I think it's a very strong environment for strengthening people. The communities are obviously smaller and more intimate. I was a very shy kid. And as a result of that, I think had I been at a big university undergrad, I would have been really intimidated and struggled a bit. Amherst was small enough that I could really build community and really have much more of a chance of meeting different people and moving around things. Smaller classes, professors unbelievably accessible. I'm going to tell you a story here that's very important to me. When I applied to Amherst and I got in the summer, I was choosing my classes for freshman year. I knew I was going to be an English-French double major. And I was going through the French classes, and I saw a class on Camus and Sartre, the 2 great 20th century French philosophers and playwright novelists. And I had read in the French AP program one of Sartre's plays, one of Camus' novels. And I thought, oh, great, I'm going to take this class. I can take this class. And I signed up and thought I was fine. And come September, I get to school and I walk into this French class and we sit down and we start talking and we start reading. And in the first week, I'm not understanding anything. I mean, nothing. I thought my French was great. I'm realizing it's not. The writing was very complex, and certainly the level at which we were working was very complex. And I had the option of canceling one class freshman year with no penalty. And I was so out of my comfort zone that at the end of the second week, I walked up to Professor Carr, the man who was teaching this. And I tried to say this in French and I couldn't. And I just said to him in English, I have to drop this class. I'm sorry. I just am not following it. I think you see this. I'm lost. I'm not. And he looked at me for a moment and he said, no. No. And he said, put his hand on my shoulder and said, you're going to be fine. Please trust me. And I was not expecting this. And I didn't know how he knew this. But he said, you're going to be fine. Just stay with it. Come to my office hours. Let's meet regularly. I'll help you. I'll support you. And we'll get you through into more of these kinds of things. And I did that. And I got an A+ on that final exam. And I don't say this to brag about the A+, but he said to me it was one of the best exams he had ever read. And it just moved me incredibly and gave me confidence and really made me sure I needed to go forward with French. And I did, and he became my advisor and ultimately a great mentor for my academics and in my life. Sometime down the road, he was, as I got to my sophomore year, he and his wife, who was also a French professor, were on sabbatical the next year, my junior year in Paris. He said, you're going to come to Paris for junior year abroad. Yes, we'll be there together. And I had just decided I was going to do playwriting. And playwriting, I had to stay there. And I did all of my playwriting work over at Smith College, which I'll talk about. There's a consortium there. And that particular professor said, no, I really need to stay here because this is something I want to pursue. I said, okay, let me think about it. What I didn't know was that summer, they went off to Paris, and Jeff took a list of all of the Amherst alumni in Paris. And he wrote a letter to each one of them to say, I have a student I really appreciate who wanted to do a junior year abroad but couldn't. And he is just wanting to come to France. And I'm wondering, could any of you possibly give him a job for the summer after his junior year? It would mean so much to me. And someone said yes. And I got a letter from Jeff. I wasn't expecting this, saying, well, if you want, I have a job for you in Paris for next summer. And they'll even pay you minimum wage. And it was just this moment of, you're kidding. This was a small company that sold medical devices. And I spent my summer in Paris, most of it, sitting on the metro, going to doctors' offices, very happily delivering medical devices to these doctors, and got to have that summer there and dip into the language and get much more connected to France, which was wonderful. That was from that incredibly close relationship that formed with him. He really was so important to me. He's not with us anymore. And I do give enormous amounts of credit to the fact that it was a very small community. And that's part of how that worked. Let me move forward. Some of the downsides of the liberal arts colleges, obviously, is they are quite small. There's less variety. There's, the classes and what's going on socially. One of the things I'll talk about a little later is liberal arts colleges, LACs, often partner up with other schools and do what's called cross-registration, where you can be at one school but take classes at the others. So they can expand their palette, their possibilities. Something I will bring up is the geography of liberal arts campuses. If you're at a big university and you're in a relatively isolated area, I think of schools like Middlebury, Bowdoin, Williams, Dartmouth, some of our great schools, but they're very isolated. Excuse me. So what you have is just the campus community. And it can be a little closing in on people, and you just start to feel like you're trapped. As opposed to urban-ish campuses. Many of you, if you're in the New York area, you're familiar with Sarah Lawrence and Yonkers. It's just 30 minutes out of Manhattan. Obviously, you're familiar with Barnard in Manhattan, and what's that school that's across the street from Barnard? Columbia. Yes. Macalester, which you may not know, is one of our great liberal arts colleges. It's in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And 20 minutes from where I'm sitting is a wonderful school by the name of Reed, here in Portland. These are among our great small colleges, and each one of them, these have access to cities and really use it. This becomes quite important. So one thing to hold in mind as you're looking at schools, and I would say this for universities as well, but especially if you're considering smaller schools, where are they? And is your child somebody who can go to Middlebury in the middle of Vermont, where there's really very little around there, and make her way through that campus and really create a society and a structure that works for them in serious ways? Again, this is all individual depending on what people's overall goals are, what they're looking for. To expand on this, we have, and some of you may know some of this, 2 5-college groups in America, where there are 5 colleges that are paired together. Amherst, mine, was part of what's called the 5-College Consortium, which includes Smith, Mount Holyoke, Hampshire, and University of Massachusetts at Amherst. They're spread over about a 10-mile diameter. It's a circle about 10 miles across. And you can take up to 2 classes a semester on another campus, and there's free bus service going 7 days a week until fairly late at night. So we would, in Northampton, where Smith College is, has a lot more nightlife than the other towns in the area. So we would often go over to Northampton on a weekend for music, for dinner, for whatever, and hang out there. And at 12 o'clock at night, we could still get back to school. And what you have in combining those 5 schools is 32,000 students. So if you're going to be bored in the Pioneer Valley, which this area is called, something's wrong, because you could never do everything that's available. There's so much going on. And it's a perfect balance between the quiet of the Amherst campus, the Smith campus, these smaller campuses, with a lot of activity in the background. Similarly, the Claremont Colleges, California, this is a cluster of 5 colleges about 25 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. And they're among, again, our great liberal arts colleges. You know some of them. But what's special about them is they're 5 campuses, but they're all connected. So it's one mega campus. It's unique on the planet as far as I know. You can literally walk from one college to another. You can take classes across all of the colleges. One of the tricky things, and again, this is called cross-registration, where you are at one school, but you're taking classes at another. And sometimes students think, I had someone who really wanted to go to Pomona being one of our top 6 or 8 colleges, period. And he really wasn't good enough. And he decided he wanted to go to Pitzer, which is still a great school, but not quite as competitive. And then I'll take all my classes at Pomona. It's like, and you're not getting a Pomona degree. Sorry, you're getting a Pitzer degree if you do this. You'll take classes at Pomona that will be noted on your transcript, but you don't have to apply to Pomona to get to those classes. But the resources at this campus are extraordinary, up to and including your meal card from one college will work at the other colleges. So if you're over on another college and it's lunchtime, you can go have lunch there. And so the social circle also opens up to include the 5 colleges, which is really extraordinary. And then there are medium-sized schools. Most of the Ivy Leagues, most of the really famous private colleges fit into the medium zone. And there's really a sweet spot there sometimes because, obviously, class sizes are more moderate. Class sizes are not these walloping 300, 400 student lectures. So things are more moderate. The instruction can be more personal. Because the numbers aren't so overwhelming, the faculty are more approachable. And I think they're more involved. There are quite a few of these schools in the Los Angeles area. I have quite a few students at these schools, be that University of San Diego, Chapman University in Orange County, Loyola Marymount, and that they really were much more connected to their faculties than I was hearing from my students at the UCs, for example. But the additional size also makes for a much richer social life, activities, all the sub-communities, different interest groups, different international groups, various things like that. There's just a lot more. So sometimes that is a sweet spot if you're looking for that kind of mixed experience. And again, this is what people like us are here for, to help guide people make these decisions. So talking to a student, getting to know them and saying, you sound like you might be a medium university-sized person. And that could be Harvard, or that could be a lot of other universities that are not quite Harvard. Important question here, folks. There's, you're hearing me in some ways say there's a little bit of PR stuff going on with colleges because on one level they are businesses and they are selling themselves. There are terms that average class size and student faculty ratio. And what these terms mean are what they sound like. This is the average size of a class on our campus, and here's the ratio of students to faculty. Here's the problem. When you're at an undergraduate school, this is just undergraduate classes. And so you know that if they say their average class size is 16 students, that's real. University graduate courses are, when you're at a bigger school, are much smaller than undergraduate. When I did my graduate degree at Oxford, I was in their Shakespeare master's program, and this shocked me. I didn't know until I got there. It was a 2-year program. In each year of the program, there were 4 students, 4 of us. So this program was never bigger than 8 people in a room. And this is not so uncommon in graduate programs. But what some universities do when they give you an average class size and student faculty ratio is they factor in all the courses they teach, including graduates. So the undergraduate data can look more attractive. I know that sounds cynical. I don't mean it that way, but it's just something when you're doing your research, you might really want to have a look at that and find out. While I'm on this note, I'll have, maybe Allison can share this for us. I have a favorite college guide, and I recommend it to all of my clients. You can pick it up on Amazon very easily. It's not expensive, and it's called the FISK, F-I-S-K-E, the FISK Guide to Colleges. And the 2024 version is now on Amazon. 2025 will come later this year. It's not a numbers guide. It's what's life on this campus like, what are the classes like, what are the faculty like, what are the surroundings of the campus, what's going on in the area, what's it like to be here? And I think these are really important questions, whether you're looking at a Cal State University or you're looking at Stanford. What is life like when you're on this campus? How will that work for you? But I would say this is really a piece of research. If I'm working with someone, we're doing a lot of this research and we're talking about things and analyzing things and really trying to focus in on what this student needs, what works best for the things this person wants. And obviously the parents are very important in that discussion. We want them at the table as we talk about this. So part of what I would say is I just am wanting to encourage people to not automatically assume that UCLA is the answer or Harvard's the answer or Princeton's the answer. They're amazing schools. There's a reason why these are our most famous schools. That said,
Kevin, many parents are asking the book name, or I think it's a research. So can you spell that again? I type in the chat box.
The name of the book?
Yes.
Okay, yes, one sec. I have to switch off of this screen. Give me a moment. Where's the chat box?
You are hoping Allison will share, right?
Right. I can send it. Just you want the title of the book for Allison?
Yes.
I will send it to her right now. Excuse me, everybody. Take just one sec.
Yeah, just send it to me. I can type on the chat box.
Okay. I'm WeChatting this to Allison. That's the fastest.
You can send it to me. You can just tell me now. F-I-X.
F-I-S-K-E.
Yeah, somebody already got it.
Guide to Colleges and 2024. Get the most recent. 2025 won't be out till later in the summer. If they want it now, we can do the 2024.
Got it.
It's a great book.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I wanted to do just a quick case study since we still have a little time. The reason I'm doing this is that I think people often don't understand how much pressure there is getting into the top schools, how difficult this is. And in some ways, I think Stanford is our best case. And I am a huge fan of Stanford's. I've had quite a few students there over the years. It's been a privilege. And some of them have had life-changing, amazing experiences. Some of them didn't. And that's the case with every school, obviously. But I think you need to consider, and this kind of framework will apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, any of the real top schools. When people hear that the acceptance rate at Stanford is 3%, I think they think, yeah, okay, so it's hard. And I've often found when I'm talking to families that, okay, stop and think about this. For every 100 applicants, only 3 will get in. 3 out of 100. This is nuts. And in every group of 100 applicants, people applying to Stanford, at least 75 to 80 will basically be perfect. And I mean GPA, scores, extra, all the other things, community service, summer programs. They'll have amazing letters of recommendation. They'll have amazing essays. And the hard part of being in admissions at a school like Stanford is you're saying no to thousands of great, great students. And it's a very difficult thing. So it's just something that I want you to hold on to when you're looking at these big schools. I'm not saying don't try if you love Stanford and your child loves Stanford. I get somebody at least every year who wants to look at it. And I've had people, I had a student go visit a number of years ago and I was back in LA. And she had a friend up there. So mom took her up, they did the campus tour, looked around, spent some time walking. And then mom was smart enough to say, okay, I'm going and getting dinner and going to the hotel. And Kelly was going to stay with the friend who was there in her dorm. So she got to Kelly's room in the afternoon. And Kelly said, come on, join us. We're going to go out to the quad and play Frisbee. And, this was like, okay, cool. We'll go play Frisbee. She didn't know what she was getting into. Suddenly there were 5 students out there who were all in a philosophy class together. And what they were doing with the Frisbee was they were talking about Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, who was one of the hardest philosophers who has ever lived. He's impossible to read. And somebody would ask a question about Kierkegaard and throw the Frisbee to the next person. And the next person would have to answer that question and then throw the Frisbee to the next person with a question. And they were out there for an hour playing Frisbee, doing philosophy. And she came back and she told me this story. And she's like, I've got to go here. This is, to have fun and to have intellectual discussion in the same frame like that. How often do we get this in life? And I'm very happy to say she had what she needed and we worked very hard and she did get in and was very, very happy there. But you need to know what those numbers mean. You need to give that some thought when you're applying because very few people, no matter how good they are, will get into these schools. So that's why, again, the 3-tier list with our high risks, our medium risks, and some low risks, we need to have this. And sometimes parents don't want to do this because they just want to focus up here. I have seen cases from colleagues, I can't say this was ever any one of my students, where parents did not back down from that position. And suddenly we had a kid who got in nowhere. And that to me is the tragedy of all time, when there were simple solutions to balance that. In a worst case scenario, if you feel your life is not going to be complete without Stanford and you're not going to get in, you can go someplace else and transfer. I don't like to talk to students about transferring at the beginning because then they go to that school and they never commit to being at that school. All they're thinking is, I really want to transfer as soon as I can. And usually you have to wait to sophomore year. You can transfer at the end of freshman year, but it's more complicated. So I really encourage people, if you're going to go to a school and you still have this beautiful Stanford up there, okay, hold on to it. But I really will encourage them to make connections and make a foundation for themselves wherever they are. And they may find that this school is wonderful and they can grow. And then guess where they can apply for grad school? And I've seen this happen where now I ended up at Stanford because I was ready for that. Yeah. So again, just don't get too locked into things. Flexibility is really important. People ask me this question all the time. What's the magic formula? What do I do? How do I get my kid there? There isn't one. There's no right academics, no right essays. There's no right activities. It's not so much what your kids do. It's how they do it. This is magic. This is my trade secret. It's what they do with their activities, with their studies, with their hobbies. It's the spirit and the mindset that drives it all. I'm a former, people don't know this, but I'm a former Chinese doctor, as strange as it may sound. It's another part of my life. I'll talk about the shen of how someone does applications. What's the heart in there? And if there's no joy in those pursuits, when they're writing about them on their applications, if there's no fun, I had a theoretical physics student a few years ago. She lived, ate, and breathed theoretical physics. This was the thing she loved most on earth. And there was no question this was her pathway. But if all people are doing is calculating steps, okay, how can I get into this fancy school? What do I need to do? You're making a very big mistake. And the very big mistake is that readers will buy this. And this gets me to sort of a last piece here. Kevin's #1 counseling rule, and I think this is the truth of anybody doing this job. If there's a magic formula, it's passion. And it's that passion is contagious. If your child is passionate about the things they do and how they write about it, how they talk about it, admissions readers will tend to sit up, lean in, pay attention. You have to remember that admissions readers read thousands of applications in a season. They come in when they're in reading season, and they're there at 7:30 in the morning, and they often don't leave until 8:30 at night. They're exhausted. And every application starts to sound the same at some point. And this is from friends who are admissions officers. Everything sounds the same. And so anytime they get to an application which has something else in it that's a little more alive and energetic and fun, they can breathe a little bit. They love that, and they'll pay much closer attention. And what you have to bear in mind is the next page. The opposite is just as true, folks. Boredom, indifference, and a lack of real investment are also contagious. If the reader is sensing that this is just, I've got to impress the schools. Here are all the fancy things I'm doing. I'm not playing soccer, I'm doing fencing, I'm doing this really weird, off the beaten track activity. If you love those things, that's great. If you're doing them just because you think it will help you get into the colleges, the readers will generally sense that. And that can be a problem. Why? Big conclusion. Admissions readers are human beings, not computers, not AI. They work ridiculously long hours, and the worst part of their job is, they'll all have students they love in the first level of reading, which will then go into committee later in the year when they're making decisions, and they watch students they love where they have to say no, just because of the numbers, because of how many enormously talented young people there are in those pools. Why did they choose such an incredibly challenging job? They love it. And one of the things that I think people don't realize, a very large percentage of admissions offices are usually made up of recent graduates. I had 2 friends at Amherst who both went into the admissions department for 2 years afterward. It's a great foundation for going into business and doing various things. And they really wanted to give back to Amherst, and they loved doing that work. Here's the big one. Admissions officers are not stupid. And people treat them like they're stupid a lot of the time. They think that we're smarter and we'll get past them. Please don't make this mistake. It will cost your child schools, I promise you. And I've seen it happen again and again and again. My final piece of advice, people, have fun. Make sure your kid is having fun. And I had people look at me like, this is serious, this is not fun. And it's like, yes, it is fun. Why? If you're having fun, if your kid is having fun, guess who else is having fun? Would you rather have the admissions officer sitting there smiling? Wow, come over and check this application. This one's really cool. This person's really fun. Or, okay, it's another application, it's another application, it's another application. It's up to you as parents, it's up to me as a counselor to guide this. And it's up to your kids to really accept this and step in that way. It makes everything better. To finish, there is no single campus that's right for everybody. And that's the beauty of our system. You can really, if you look carefully, you can really find what you need. You can really find what your child needs. And it's worth visiting, it's worth talking to people, it's worth talking to people like us. Excuse me. And it's just a huge luxury. So happy hunting with us. Allison has a document, or Sophia has a document. I actually put together a list. I see Helen just raised her hand. A list, just a general list of the top liberal arts colleges and some of the connections and interconnections between things, and then lists of universities. And what I was showing in these lists, and I don't know how we're going to share this, Sophia, is with the universities, I'm listing the undergraduate population next to the overall population, so you get a sense of what that dynamic is. If it's a very small undergraduate population to a very big population,
Yeah.
the undergraduate is probably going to get a bit less. And then at the end, I have a list of public universities, and one of the things same thing, plus. The public universities limit the number of out-of-state and international students they take. Some of you may know the UC is, as of last year, went back to only 15% out-of-state. Maximum it had been 25 to 30%, which means for international students and out-of-state students, the UC has just got quite a bit harder. So this document is available. It'll be on the website, Sophia, I think.
Yeah, Allison, I think she's trying to share the screen. So if you could, are you done? This is the last slide.
I'm done.
Okay, if you could maybe stop sharing, and Allison will be sharing the
Oh,
one
and there it
you
is.
open
And there
to.
it is.
Yes.
Right there.
Yeah.
So here's the list. Do you want me to go through it real quickly just to help?
Please.
Okay, so LAC is this first list. Okay, I have schools that are in the Northeast of the United States, and then I have schools that are sort of inching away from that, and then schools that are scattered around the country. Most of these are just straightforward colleges. I call out Colorado College because they have a thing called the block plan, and they're unique in America. You take 4 courses a semester like you do at most schools, but you take them one at a time. This is incredible, and I've had students go there, and so 3.5 weeks, each course, you finish one course, you have a few days off, and then you start the next course. So if you have a student who really likes to focus in, it's a very strong school, but if you have a student who really likes to focus in on one thing and feels overwhelmed by carrying too many things, it might just be worth thinking about. We talked about the 5 college systems. I just mapped them out here for you. And I broke out a list of, we still have a small number of women's colleges left in the country. Smith and Mount Holyoke, which are in the Amherst consortium. They're both within about 10 miles of Amherst. I did 20% of my total classes at Amherst over at Smith. They had some French classes I wanted, and then I did all of my theater work because Amherst at that time was not very good in theater, and Smith had a great department. So you can move around with these things. Wellesley, the great women's college just outside Boston, has cross-registration with MIT, meaning from Wellesley, you can go automatically take classes at MIT. There's a 20-minute train that goes from Wellesley into town. Bryn Mawr, down outside Philadelphia, has cross-registration with Haverford College, Swarthmore College, and UPenn. So you can take classes at those other campuses back and forth. Scripps is part of the 5 college schools in California. Barnard, which is maybe our great women's college at this point, is an amazing place. Many of you probably know it. Cross-registration at Columbia, you can run back and forth across the street and take classes at Columbia. And then specifically, Barnard has this special arrangement with Columbia where you do a 5-year program, 4 years at Barnard and 1 year at Columbia. You get the BA from Barnard, and then you do a master's at Columbia. They have it in economy, social sciences. Gosh, I'm going to forget right now. I think there's 5 of them. And the other one, which I think is extraordinary because I'm an honorary Frenchman and I love France, Sciences Po, really political science is what that means, but Sciences Po is one of the 2 most famous universities in France, along with the Sorbonne, which you know. And this program, they actually do 3 years at Barnard. They do a 4th year at Sciences Po. They get their bachelor's from Barnard, and then a 5th year at Sciences Po, and they get a master's from Sciences Po. Sciences Po does political science, political economy, international economy, things like that. And it's the most sought after school in France. People fight. It's kind of like Stanford. People fight to the death to get into Sciences Po. So this is an amazing resource if you have a daughter. And the nice thing about Barnard is even though their campus is single sex, Columbia is literally across the street. So it's a much more open kind of environment. Notable universities, you know all of these. Caltech is the only one that surprises people often that the undergrad population is less than 1,000. It's very small. And they actually do a good job with the undergrads, even though the overall school is quite a bit bigger. I've had a number of students go to Caltech and really be well taken care of. You know all of these other schools in the midst. So a lot of the Ivies and top schools, again, are in the medium bracket. They're under 13. And then if you look into the larger bracket, some of these schools are just over the line. Yale is just a little over 13, Boston College a little over. But some of them start to get bigger as well. Columbia is quite large. And I think on one level, the Columbia undergrad experience is strong, but I do feel like a lot of weight leans into the graduate programs because there's just so much bigger. I'd say the same thing about NYU, that the graduate programs take a lot of space, even though the undergraduate education is obviously excellent. And then finally, if we can scroll down to the last page, this is just some international schools I picked out. Some of them really the best known. People may not know right now in terms of rankings. The surprise winner for the past 2 years was the University of Florida. And I just heard this, and I know it's a very good school, but it is now the top ranked state school. Florida is a tough state right now, and it's a very big place. I'm a huge fan of Michigan. I'm a huge fan of Chapel Hill. These are very difficult sometimes to get into out of state. So the third number here, the percent, is how many people they take from out of state, and that includes international. So if you look at UCLA, they're only taking 13% total out of state and international, when a few years ago it was closer to 30%. There were budget issues and debates and arguments, and they switched back because the feeling was the citizens in California were getting too little of the pie. And the system really is designed for Californians. So this has been pulled back. UCSD, even smaller in terms of international and out of state. So these are just good things to know as some starting points if you think your kids are going to be applying in this direction. This doesn't mean if you're in love with UCSD, apply. You just need to know that the odds are going to be a little tougher in terms of how many students they take from out of state. Texas is huge. It's the other, maybe one of the 2 or 3 hardest state schools to get into right now. It's a spectacular, spectacular place, as I mentioned. I'm a huge fan of University of Washington, Seattle. You may not know it as well, but it has amazing resources just outside Seattle. And my final note is Penn State, which is a state school. It's a very good state school, and I think people don't take it seriously sometimes. Starting in about 2014, there were surveys of recruiters hiring people from major companies, and they asked them to rank their favorite schools. What were the first schools they went to? And I've already blown the punchline, but if I asked you, what's the top school for recruiters in America, everyone jumps up and says Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Princeton. Folks, it's Penn State every year. It's kind of a strange thing when you think about it. One of the things the recruiters will say is that the students at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, I'm at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford, I'm better than everybody. There's a certain ego involved in that. The Penn State kids don't have that. Notice also that of the 45,000 students there, 40,000 are undergrads. So the resources tend to go toward the undergrads. I have friends who went there who talk about they had so much research, so much going on. And I think there's a little more practicality at Penn State. And I think the recruiters like that sometimes because there's practical skills, not just I'm a really fancy theoretical thinker. Questions? I'm done.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed the information you shared. Timing is great. And you talk about a lot of the information the other counselor in the past have not touched. So that's really nice. Very much appreciative. Okay. Hold on one second. See if I can also share my screen back so I can have it because some of the parents are asking for the Arima. Okay. Hold on one second. Let me scroll down. Here we go. Okay, for the parents who wanted to have the, let me see the one here. Okay, here it is. So let me just, before going to Q&A, for the barcode for the parents and potential student, if you find Kevin information sharing demonstrated, he is a very knowledgeable, very experienced college counselor, independent college counselor. You may scan the barcode on the right-hand side. That way, me and Allison, we will follow up with you to schedule a 30 minutes free consultation with Kevin. That way you can ask him your personal questions. You can ask your individual questions to asking any particular things to evaluating and also see Kevin will be the right person for your child to go through the high school period to applying for their suitable colleges or universities. Okay, so scan the barcode on the right-hand side. If you are not ready if your child is still younger, you may want to go into our IvyCompass WeChat group to continue watching out for our information sharing and also being engaged in this community. You can scan the barcode on the left-hand side. That way you will be staying with IvyCompass WeChat group. You can continue waiting for information like a Kevin or other consultant maybe come on this kind of type of presentation platform to share their perspective. You know, when you hear more people from different angles, we're also trying very hard to providing different kind of type of knowledge, piece knowledge to you to equip your knowledge base. That way you can be better supporting your child through that very challenging period to making less anxiety, less challenging, less worrisome. Then you can, you know, scan the barcode, okay, on the right-hand side. Also, one thing I remember, Kevin is also very good about helping child to become somebody in terms of capability, in terms of leadership. Kevin also focus on his time on those areas as well. So let me get this out of the site. I also going to starting the Q&A session. Kevin, I'm going to read some of the chat box questions to you, and you answer those questions. Also for the parents, if you wish to have a conversation with Kevin directly, please raise your hand. Okay, please raise your hand. I will, once I finish some of the question in the chat box, I will also open up the mic for you to have a conversation with Kevin directly. That way you can also have one question only, one question. Kevin,
So
go ahead.
May I add one thing to this?
Yeah.
Parents, one of the things that I think people often don't know, or maybe you do, I know for me, I love starting with sophomores when I get the opportunity. If you bring me your late junior year or summer junior year student, yes, I can still work with them. But by the time they're going into senior year, the mold is mostly made. We can't change very much. We can just do the best we can with what we have. When I get the chance to work with someone, especially early in sophomore year, and all my colleagues will say this, everyone at IvyCompass will say this, we can help guide the choices and shape the landscape. The things they do, the classes they pick, the summer things, the research, where do they put their energy? Who do they talk to? So I just always will encourage people, if I get a child earlier, I know I can do more than if I just start in the application process.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kevin, for mentioning that, because we do have some counselor more preferable to working with the student in the 11th grade and also seniors. And I'm glad you're saying, because there's more and more I see the parents are starting in contact with us in the 8th grade, which is, I think, is very smart. It's very smart because that way, because everything starts 9th grade, it's kind of almost to a construction of the building. You're building a basement, then you're building the first floor, second floor, and third floor. And so the earlier you start, the better your child have the capability building a solid foundation, and then gradually building, 1.2, 1.3 version. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So very good. Okay. Let me get to the first question is, hi, Kevin, if possible, could you touch the topic of whether orchestra conductor or college coach will have any influence to admission process in liberal arts college? Yes, in which college, or no, in what college?
So orchestra conductor, meaning that your student is in an orchestra and the conductor's writing. All the conductor's really going to be able to do is write a letter of recommendation, probably. Unless the conductor happens to say, wow, my best friend teaches at Juilliard, or my best friend teaches music at Swarthmore, one of the great liberal arts colleges. More than that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much more somebody can do unless there's direct personal contacts.
Maybe recommendation letter. Maybe this person also asking the school coaches will have any influence in this process.
So the school athletic coaches or the school college counselors?
I believe the way they're writing it is any orchestra conductor or college coach. I think they do, because sometimes they write a recommendation letter, right? Like you said.
I don't do recommendation letters as a college counselor. I've done them as a teacher. I don't think it's appropriate for me as a paid employee of the family to write letters of recommendation? I've been asked.
No. They were asking in the liberal arts school, those roles, school college counselor or not youth, college coach, have any influence in the process? Yeah, school counselors.
It depends on the school. I came out of a school with 100 students in my class, so my college counselor had to write 100 letters of recommendation from the school. A school counselor's letters are as much about the school, what's going on, context, as they are about the student. I know that the high school that I worked most closely with when I was counseling in Los Angeles had 600 students in each class, one counselor and one assistant. So this poor woman was writing 600 letters of recommendation every year. And so I look at this and think I know her and I think she's great, but there's no way she can do that really, really well. So I think the letters, I won't say that they don't matter, they do. One of the side ways I can approach this is to say, I would have your child starting junior year, go make an appointment with the counselor, get to know the counselor. It's not bring them presents, it's not that kind of thing, but it's just start talking to them, let them get to know you. Because in senior year, what they'll ask you to do is a brag sheet. A lot of you may know this, where you're going to talk about all the great things you've done, and they use this information to sort of put together a letter, and they may talk to the student for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour maximum. But I really encourage students in the same way, go talk to your teachers and get to know them. Go talk to the college counselor. Go in and say, I just have some, I'm a junior, I'm just starting my junior year. I have some questions. Could I have 10 or 15 minutes of your time and talk to you a little? This makes an impression and it will stick. I think if that answers your question, that would be my answer.
Yes, kind of. Wang Fen, if I did not answer clearly understanding your question, if you think Kevin and did not answer the question in the right way, you can also raise your hand asking this question in your own way. Okay, that's how we understand the writing. If you think,
Sophia, yeah. So, 我讲中文吧，可能王芬的问题应该是，可能他问的是在大学里面的乐队的指挥家，或者是大学里面的可能一个校队，一个体育校队的一个 coach， 他们是不是对这个大学的招生的 process 有一定的influence？ 也就是说，他可能会去找这个 admission office 去问，说，哎，我想要这个学生，我想要那个学生，你们能不能在这个招生的时候考虑一下这个学生？可能是这个意思，对吧，王芬？
是吗？
对，他应该是这个意思。对，就是说，
OK，
你是大学里面的乐队，大学里面有乐队嘛，他的这个指挥家，或者是校队的 coach。
然后他又问的是 liberal arts college， 所以你的意思就是说在 liberal arts college。Okay.
对
All right. Let me reframe that to Kevin again. Then I think maybe she's asking, in the liberal arts college, in the college orchestra conductor or college coach, will have any influence? Can they go into the admission office to say, I want this student, or do they have any influence for this?
The question is, how do they find out? So athletic coaches, yes, we know they scout.
Yeah.
So that, if that coach gets to see you, your coach in high school often will recommend you to a coach at a certain school that they know. For orchestra conductor, wow, this is just, no one's ever asked me this question. I had a student some years ago who was played the flute and was, I think, good, maybe not great. And her mother actually arranged, she was in a boarding school in Connecticut. Her mother arranged for her to fly to Chicago. Northwestern has a great music program. And mom wanted her to go to Northwestern. The truth is this student was really not good enough for Northwestern. And she took a private lesson with the professor in the Northwestern School of Music who taught flute. 2-hour lesson, the professor charged $500 an hour. This was a big investment. And at the end of that session, the professor's comment was, I think you can still improve. I'm not sure. I think you're quite ready. So it was a very hard thing for this young woman. She came back and we had a conversation and she was crying and upset because she had tried. So I think maybe my response is handle with care, because this can be good, this can be bad. I have had times where someone has been able to meet someone at a college or university and make a connection. For someone to say, I'm going to walk into the admissions office and say, I want to talk to you, like a professor or a coach, I need to talk to you about this person, you've got to make an enormous impression. And is that by itself, if you're already a strong candidate, yes, maybe that's the extra thing that helps. I think what people often are looking for is, my student's not quite good enough. If this is the level of the school admissions generally, and you think the student is here, I don't know if that's going to put your student here. I can't say yes or no, because it would depend on the specifics of the situation.
Yeah,
that's a conversation.
Yeah. For athlete, in the past, our consultant mentioned about if your athlete recruited by the school, yes, the coach will have a lot of weight on their admission. But the academic had to be good enough as well. Maybe a little bit less, it's okay. But okay, let's move on. We have a lot of other questions. Thank you. Next question is also interesting, asking how was the food options at those more remote liberal arts colleges? I never received this kind of question either. Yeah,
I love this question. I come from a food family, and yes, this was important. I don't think they're going to be any better or any worse than any other school. I think it just depends on the school. And one of the things that's really happened in the past 10 years, because people are asking this question all the time, is the schools have really upped, many of them, the quality of their food. And people just were tired of walking in and getting the same junk cafeteria.
I know. Majority is not good. Yeah, majority. I heard. I have my son is in Johns Hopkins, and not good at all. My brother's son also in Johns Hopkins, and BC is not good at all. Very expensive, and it's not good food.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. What was I just going to say? I lost something.
I know which school is best food. Everybody commenting in Cornell. If a food is something you really emphasize on, multiple people told me Cornell food is like fabulous. My friend's daughter gaining so much weight in that college year, 4 years. Food was fantastic.
So moms, bear in mind, if you listen to this and you send your child to one of those schools and they come back 20 pounds heavier, that's something.
Cornell, and ice cream is the best. So, okay.
What I will say partly is the schools that are more isolated, Cornell, it's a small town, so it's a little isolated, but there's something there. But the schools that are really more isolated, I think they have to have better food because they don't have off-campus options.
Right. Okay, great. Good question. Thank you. Okay, next question is, any suggestions on small school with a strong engineer program?
Tricky. This is tricky. The first suggestion, and your son or daughter has to be super strong, Harvey Mudd. It's one of the 5 Claremont colleges. It is one of the very few strictly undergrad engineering, comp sci, physics, chemistry, hard science, bio schools. It's 880 students total, I think. Again, it's part of the Carleton 5 colleges. So there's a bigger community around it. Harvey Mudd, I think, has some of its own English classes and things like that, which you can do, but really, I don't know why you wouldn't take advantage of the other schools. In the small schools, gosh, there are a few, and I'm trying to remember which they are. I would have to do a little more digging, maybe. In the Amherst 5 college system. So remember, if your child is at one of the Claremont colleges, they can take classes at Harvey Mudd. Same thing if you're in the Amherst 5 college system. UMass Amherst has a really, really strong engineering program. If you like, let me make a note, and I will, Sophia, can you keep note of who this is? And I'll see if I can come up with a little bit of information for that.
Okay.
I don't have that answering off the top of my head. It's really not a question that comes up a lot, because people who want engineering typically are looking more toward the bigger
school. Okay. Let me write down the person. Also for Qing Wei, if you would either get my WeChat. Let me give to you. 16129666688. This for either you coming afterwards. I will make sure Kevin, if he provided more information, if WeChat, I can WeChat to you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, make sure you connecting WeChat either with me or Allison. We will get the answer to you, okay? All right, the next question is also very good. Hold on one second. I was just kind of scored up a little bit. Okay, this question is coming from Tracy Huang. She's saying, appreciated a lot for the insights. Can you please share more light on the diversity of liberal arts college, given their relatively smaller size? In general, would that be advantage for Asian to apply or a bit more disadvantage for Asian? Or different way to ask how the Asian student could standing out among all the candidates? Thank you.
Let me answer the first part first. I wish I just was looking at Amherst's DEI statement and then in the breakdown. Amherst, I think now is 40% non-white, maybe 50% non-white as of this year, which I'm very proud of. That's extraordinary. They've really, and obviously we're in a tricky era in terms of the Harvard lawsuit and how affirmative action does or doesn't work. I think they're making enormous efforts, but I think all the top schools are. I don't have a sense, I'm not aware of, there may be a few schools which have less of that. I do feel like the LACs are more community oriented by their nature. And I think they want to make sure that everyone has a sense of comfort. It's very different from what it was in my generation, where it was predominantly white people. There were a few Asians. We had a very small African-American community. We had a few Hispanic students, but it wasn't strong. I seem to feel like I read that Amherst is now 20% students of various Asian, and that's China, Korea, Japan, India, the whole range of Southeast Asia. And I think schools like Williams and Bowdoin and Middlebury, all of those schools really have made great efforts. So I don't think in the first part of the question, I'd be concerned about, like back when I was there, which is in the 1980s, yeah, that was not an easy place to be Asian. I remember having one friend who was African-American who just felt very isolated because of that. I wouldn't be worried about that so much now. And one of the things you can do is you can go onto schools' websites, and I think often you can get a breakdown, a race demographic, a sense of what's there, including male and female. And sometimes I'm startled that some of these schools have 65% women or 65%. We don't have so many 65% men, but there are a number of schools that are more dominantly female. Good news, bad news, depends on what you're thinking about. How Asian students can stand out. This is delicate. One of the things that I come across, because again, my population has been 50% Greater China and another 10% Korea and some Indian students as well over the years. I think it goes back to what I said about passion and love.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to, I'm doing this because I wake up every morning and this is what I want to do. Some days I don't even want to go to school. I want to stay home and play my piano. I want to stay home and draw. I want to stay home and do theoretical physics because I love this. I think the passion factor is so important, and I don't find it quite as often in my Asian students. I'll work on that with them. I'll push them toward that always.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little more of a quietness and a restraint that's built into the culture. It's respect in part, and I like it. But I think sometimes it's not, I'm here, listen to me. I don't, you don't want to go too far, obviously. Passion is contagious. Love of something is contagious. That needs to be in the application. That certainly needs to be in the essays. No, you're not writing love poems, but the essays have to have that. And I think any good coach will be able to guide you through that. I hope that helps.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Next question, Cindy. Cindy Dong, you're asking if someone who gets into Ivy League school or top liberal arts school, what advice would you give? Can I Kevin give a little bit story on that? Because I had another coach talk about this. If you can get into Ivy League school, definitely go to Ivy League school because ultimately reputation still help you, right? But I have a student getting to like University of Michigan. A lot of Asian family are very familiar with the University of Michigan. Also, the student get into Rice. I remember my other college counselor recommending this kids going to Rice because the reason is he said a lot of Asian family don't know the liberal arts school are exactly what you said tonight, everything benefiting. So he said, going to University of Michigan, you might get lost. But if you go to Rice, you're going to get like very, very concentrated relationship with your faculty and stuff. So end up that's one of my friend's son, and I went to Rice. So in that level down, Ivy League school, then I believe liberal arts school is something you really can take a look and think about it. But if Ivy League school still, I'm thinking you still would go to Ivy League school. So, okay. Kevin, I don't know if you internet is a little bit stuck. Are you still there? Yeah, I think Kevin internet is a little bit stuck. Let's give it a moment for him to signing back on. But Cindy, did we answer that question for you while we're waiting for Kevin to log back in? Okay. In the meantime, maybe we go through some of the questions. Maybe Allison, while we're waiting Kevin to back on, we can see if some of the questions we can answer as well.
好的，没问题。
OK，有一个家长是问那个 7 years dental program，我知道 Pittsburgh， 我们去年我有一个朋友的女儿就去了 Pittsburgh 的7 years dental program。OK, Kevin's back on. Are you okay, Kevin? Okay, I know you had an internet issue, so that's okay.
Okay, sorry.
We just answered a little bit question about asking you, do you know any other? I know one of my friend's daughter went to a Pittsburgh University for a 7 years dental program. Do you know any other school have a 7 years of dental program other than Pittsburgh University?
I love University of Pittsburgh. It's a great school.
Yeah.
Offhand, I don't.
Okay.
There are quite a few that have med 7-year programs. Let me add that to my notes and I'll do a little research.
Okay, this is from Ian. I also gonna write down.
Wow, that's a good question. I also do want to answer that other question, in the choice between an LAC and a university.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with automatically you go to the Ivy League school, because as much as I've had people say, well, the Ivy League schools, they're better for hiring. I will tell you, back in the 1980s, I had 3 friends go to Harvard Med, 2 friends go to Yale Law, 2 or 3 friends go to Columbia Business. We were not having trouble finding jobs and finding grad schools and things like that. The top liberal arts colleges are, I think, every bit as much respected in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the question, like if you say to me, Michigan versus Rice, very, very different schools. I love them both. And when, I think someone asked, what do you do with this? My first answer is celebrate. This is an amazing thing to have. May your child continue to have such bad problems.
Yeah.
These are very different campuses. And I think partly, if you haven't, you visit, you get a feel for them, you see where your child feels most at home. I have somebody now in Duke grad school who went to Rice undergrad and had a spectacular experience. Rice is in Houston. It's a bigger city. There's more there. Ann Arbor is a beautiful small city. Again, with Michigan, if you can get into the honors college, that's huge. It really shrinks the community, so you have more individual attention. I don't think there's a black and white, right, wrong scenario. If I were having this problem, if I had this with one of my clients, I'd already know the kid fairly well, and I would be like, okay, is this child more suited to the LAC scenario, more suited to the bigger school? I think you're going to have to ask that on a case-by-case basis. There's no abstract answer. I'm sorry.
I think every decision has pros and cons, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Next question I think is really good. The question is, what if the child doesn't have a big ambition, does not know what they're passionate about? How would this essay or application still be appealing?
That's a hard
Great
question.
question. Yeah.
My answer in part is going to sound self-serving. Start earlier with a counselor. If you bring that student to me at the end of 11th grade, beginning of 12th grade, especially sometimes students, families show up in like September of 12th grade. My time is limited. There's a limit to what I can do. I have to move very quickly. If I have that student in 10th grade, I would do quite a bit of work in terms of trying to develop interests, explore things, have him or her try things out and see what makes sense. Not everybody wants to be CEO of planet Earth. And I don't think everyone needs to be CEO of planet Earth or the top violinist in the Philharmonic. It's what makes this student happy, what brings this student alive. And sometimes when I get a student who's in that space, I think they just haven't found what they love yet. And so I'll definitely push them through different things, not so much what's right and what's wrong, but waiting to see something in the eyes that suddenly lights up a little. It's like, oh, this is fun. I like it. And that might be doing crossword puzzles. And no, you're not going to go to college to do crossword puzzles, obviously. But it would give me a bit of a frame and a bit of a context to say, okay, so within this, what can we maybe pull out to help get them to college and have them with a serious direction? Because as I'm sure you all understand, many colleges, you have the main essay on the Common App, but then many colleges have supplemental questions, which are often, why do you want to come here? And you have to be able to convince the school, not, I want to go there because you're such a great school, but here's me, here's you, look. So allow me to go back to my earlier metaphor, courtship. You're sort of doing a courtship with the school. And the more passion you have for what you do, the easier it is to convince the school.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. I'm going to answer one question from the chat box, then I will go to the raise hand live talk, okay? This question is, my kids is learning in Chinese public high school. You're talking about maybe in China public high school. Does Kevin providing consulting for students like my kid to apply in proper US university? Absolutely, yes. Yeah, Kevin has a lot of experience working with a Chinese student in China, international school, and also public school, okay? And if your kids in Shanghai, 10th grade in Shanghai, absolutely, Kevin will be the right person for you. So make sure you scan the barcode on the right-hand side. So we will arrange for you to have a private conversation, 30 minutes with the Kevin. And that way we can ask him detailed questions. He has a lot of experience helping students coming from mainland China, for sure. Okay. Cindy also have a question. Yes, definitely, for sure. 10th grade, 9th grade, even 8th grade. I see a lot of parents coming to us 8th grade right now for the second semester. So definitely for sure, it would be the right time. Okay, let me go into the parents raising their hand for a while now. I really appreciate JW and Laura 7968 being raise hand for a long time. Now I can open mic for you to talk about. JW, you are going next, please.
Hello, Kevin. Thank
Hi
you
there.
thank you for the great talk. So I'm just curious, right? So you have been a school counselor, so there are many school counselors. So what's your approach different from others?
I'm not, okay, let me correct you. Hold on a second. I'm not a school counselor. I'm a private counselor. I work directly with the families. I'm not connected to a school anywhere.
Yeah, like what made you different from other private counselors?
What makes me different from other private counselors? Partly experience. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've worked through 350 application processes. I do both undergrad and grad, so I work on both levels. So some part of me wants to say, ask my students. I was at a, I'll answer it this way with a quick story. I was at a dinner party about 5 years ago, and there was a gentleman at the party who was just kind of loud and a little drunk, I think, and looked at me and said, "So what do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a college counselor." He said, "Oh, what school are you do it with?" I said, No, I'm not at a school. I work directly with the families as an independent." "Oh, so you just like read a lot of essays?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's a big part of what I do, of course." And I sat back for a second and something hit me. And it's a word I used earlier in the presentation. I said, what I really do is I'm a mentor. I get involved in my students' lives. I work fairly close. One of the answers to your question is I have so many students I used to work with who are still friends, who I still talk to, who still show up and check in with me, who still sometimes come for advice, and they're doing this, what do you think? And to me, these are the greatest compliments from what I do, that people stay with me, people refer their friends to me at times because they had a good experience. I love what I do. It's not, for me, this is not just a job, it's a calling. I didn't choose it, it chose me. I didn't go into the world thinking I'm going to be a college counselor. Again, just from doing the SAT tutoring, I sort of stumbled into this. But it's where I feel most at home. And I love my kids. I love getting to know them. I'm just, I think, about to start with somebody new here. And already in the emails, I'm like, "Oh, I like this young woman. She's really cool. She's fun." And I'm curious to see who she is. So I'm always very curious about my kids. I'm not someone who says you have to go to Stanford, or you have to go to Williams. I'm going to say, where do you have to go? What do you want? And obviously, we're working with numbers and all the various things. But I'm always looking for my students to come away feeling happy with where they're going, but also to be feeling happy with themselves and how this has gone and who they are. I'm always looking to help them grow so that by the time, if I just work with someone for a year, I hope this student is more mature and more thoughtful, is more aware of things than when we started. So I always look to have a slightly deeper, bigger impact that most of the time the students won't even know that I'm having. There's just times when I know this moved. So I think that's probably, I feel uncomfortable because I don't like beating my chest. I think that's the answer from me. It's the way I engage with my kids. And I think
it's a great question.
When my kids give recommendations at times, I've gotten recommendations from students. This is often what they say. And it's just like, I love that.
Great. JW, thank you for that question. That's a really good question. I think every single independent counselor are different. They have different personality. They also have different angle. They also have different experience. They also have different student they work with, accumulating who they are. I think by you to choose the right person is about best match about personality, match about the style. I think all of the independent counselor we put on this platform are capable of doing their job. They're serious, they are intelligent, they're dedicated, they're hard worker. But I think for you as a parents to choose the right person for your child is take a look at their style, their personality. Sometimes we also have to, that's why we gave it 30 minutes of free consultation, is because that way, as a parent, you can bring your child, have dialogue with Kevin. If a child feel comfortable talking with the Kevin, then that's good sign. Okay, so this is a good question. Thank you. Next one is for Laura, 7968. Please open up your mic to talk.
Hey, thank you, Alison. Thank you, Sophia, for this webinar, and thank you, Kevin, for the great insights. I have a couple of quick questions. First one is, my daughter is a rising sophomore, and she's interested in the pre-med path. My first question is, for a pre-med student, what's your thoughts about pros and cons for between big public school like UC Berkeley versus Ivy school like Brown versus the small liberal? Second question is, would you please give some experience of the
one question first? One question.
Can I take one question at a time so I don't have to juggle? It's funny.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
I've actually done many med school applications in my career. I do a lot of grad work, and med school is the hardest application process in America, period. For every 10 people who apply to med school every year, about 3 get in anywhere. So it's very difficult. One of the things I will always say to someone who's interested in med school, if I'm talking to them in high school, don't be a pre-med major. Major in something you love and do the pre-med prerequisites. There's a long list of courses you have to take for med school, but go broader. If your daughter has a passion for history, if your daughter has a passion for pure math, if your daughter has a passion for art or theater, go do that as well and develop the human being. There's something about the pre-med program that really is kind of robotic in a way. You're having information crammed into you and you're spinning it back on test, and you have to do this, and you will have to do it in med school, and you will certainly have to do it when you take your MCATs and the boards and all of those things. But I really would say already open the landscape up a little bit, because med school in the end is looking for people, human beings that are developed and interesting, not just I'm a brilliant mathematician and biologist and chemist. Mm-hmm. Anybody who gets to the point of being a valid med school candidate has all of those things, but they have to have, I'll go back to the Chinese, they have to have the shen, they have to have the heart for this. And so often I hear stories from friends, doctors who do things and there's just no heart. Just take this drug, bye, I'm on to someone else. Here's my bill for $5,000. And I just feel like go to medicine because you love it and you want to help people. And I say this as a former Chinese doctor. I spent 10 years of my life working with people in medicine. Mm-hmm. It's 10 of the best years I ever lived in. It was a wonderful experience. Mm-hmm. But I did it I wasn't making a lot of money. It wasn't something about that. It was just something that I also stumbled into and I loved. So does that answer your first question?
Yeah, this is exactly her case. She loves to help people. She's sensitive. She's empathy. But the only thing she likes is, doing this hospital volunteer. She likes shadowing doctors. She likes to interact with patients. So I think you can tweak a little bit of the perspectives from pre-med to healthcare, other bigger umbrella, but it's hard to switch to history or communication. She doesn't like that. She only likes the medicine and healthcare field.
So what I hear from you immediately, Laura, is your kid really is a doctor. This kid needs to be in medicine, obviously. And I get so many people going toward medicine undergrad. I'm like, why are you doing this? Because mom and dad decided you need to go to med school a lot of the time.
Right.
This is passion. Remember I was talking about a love story? You're telling me a love story right now.
Right.
Somebody who's doing this because, oh my God, this is what I wake up in the morning, I want to do. There is a danger if she's just doing this. Sometimes we'll talk about breadth, having like extracurriculars with a broad range. And then sometimes we're talking about depth. What your daughter has obviously is great depth. And so she's going to need to develop that. If I were working with her, I might encourage her to find other pieces to add to the landscape. Because if she's applying to a very, very competitive college and she feels too narrow, sometimes that can be a problem. She's going to certainly have one great, her personal statement. I can already imagine some of what she might do. But if she's applying to Stanford and there are 8 more pieces of writing to do in a Stanford application, it's the hardest application in America. What is she going to write about? And my job would be to help try to find those pieces of the landscape ahead of time and help her develop them. And I think any good counselor would do that.
Yeah. Okay. Laura, if you have more questions, you're welcome to scan the barcode on the right-hand side, and then you will have that one-on-one time with Kevin to understanding his style even more. I'm going to give this because right now it's 10:57, so I want to give an opportunity to the next one. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Hopefully we'll talk to you more. Yeah. Sounds like your daughter is very, very fine young woman. Yin Yang, would you please?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunities and then tonight's the seminar. That's great. So I have a question, like for high school students, if they tend to go to direct, like the 7 yes, accelerated, even medical or like dental school. Is that for the whole education? Do you think it's the kind of do something like you mentioned, like humanity part, like the broader part?
It's very strange for me to say, honestly. I've very rarely worked with people going toward the 7-year dental. I don't, you know, people with 7-year med. I very rarely worked with them personally. I have a lot of colleagues who have. I look at this, it's in a way connected to the question Laura just asked. Laura's daughter might be a great 7-year med program because she's so defined. And so she's clear about what she wants. If a student has that kind of definition, and you have to be unbelievably strong to get into those 7-year programs, they're super competitive. If your daughter's a little less defined and absolutely clear, I could say maybe do 4 years undergrad, same principle, you know, maybe don't be a pre-med major, do something else and do the med school requirements and give her an extra year to, I mean, I know this means you have to pay another year of school, but give her an extra year of development personally. I think, you know, all these students I've worked with who have gone into med school, several of them actually waited 2 or 3 years after college, did some things in the field, worked in public health. One worked in San Francisco with helping opiate addictions and things like that. And I went back to med school in a very different way than she would have done otherwise. So sometimes I'm actually a very big fan of extra time if you're not feeling pressure time-wise. So the question I would ask you to think about is your daughter going down a 7-year path, or are you thinking about this for her? And already you're saying medical or dental. So that suggests to me there's not one passion right away.
No, it's dental. Like she can,
it is dental. Okay.
And then she decide, not the parent at all.
Okay.
That's totally her decision. Like she wants to.
So the question would be, does she want to commit that and have less overall personal education and more focus straight in? And sometimes, again, this is the right path. I don't think there's a right or wrong option. Again, I'm going to be looking. I've not come across the 7-year dental programs. It's not something anyone can come to me with. And I'm going to do a little digging to see what's out there. And I'll share this information back with Sophia and Allison once I have it. It'll probably be, Monday. It's not going to be tonight. And look at this and see, is this the right path? Does your daughter want to go a little more narrow? I had the great privilege of working at a student I worked with for undergrad who went to UCSD and then came back to me for dental school and ended up at USC and then came back to me for orthodontics. So we actually had 3 full application processes. What I can say about her is her passion for dentistry was there day one. When I met her, maybe 10th grade, I think I met her originally actually in an SAT class I was teaching. And when we started to talk, she was already talking about this. And this was really what she wanted. But she went through full 4 years. She did a ton of community service in the dental world and things like that. Even as undergrad, there were programs to do. When she was at USC, she committed a tremendous amount of time to community service, again, into teaching dental health in the community. So she would go into poorer communities in Los Angeles and talk about how you can take care of yourself and not just brush your teeth, but diet and other things. And she became an orthodontist, and she's now in Los Angeles. She's been practicing for some years now as an orthodontist. And that was really what she wanted to do. So she was very clear in the beginning. If your daughter's really that clear, which is great, when we get something, the passion is really clear. It's just a question of how she chooses to follow it. So I might explore the 7-year DDS, but I might also explore other options just to see what else is out there and what excites her. And who has great programs, like USC does have some great programs for charity oriented toward dental care. It's a hard school to get into these days, but if she's good enough to do a 7-year dental program, she's probably good enough to go to USC. And I don't know where you're based. So are you New York? Are you East Coast?
East, yeah. He had another option is the University of Pittsburgh, like the whole package scholarship.
Yes, so you can retire. I have had students go there. I'm a huge fan of this school in a way that very few people know. Pittsburgh, this is a very quick thing, but Pittsburgh is a very big school.
Yeah, beautiful.
And partly you have Carnegie Mellon a mile away, and there is cross-registration, but Pittsburgh has enormous resources for helping individual students and giving individual support. It's very unusual. Discovered this about 10 years ago when I had somebody applying there. And I remember several students, I said, well, there's great individual resources. And they're like, yeah. And then the student who really wanted to go there looked at me and said, and I'm like, well, these other people aren't so sure. And she's like, good, more for me. And they have all kinds of individual support structures and helping students get through things. And this particular young woman did so well there. So I'm a big fan of that place just because of the spirit of the place. Is it going to matter whether she comes out of, if she's coming out of a 7-year Pitt program?
Not Pitt. Oh, you said yours. Okay. Her 7-year program is on the New Jersey NJIT.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't think she's going to go wrong either way. And I don't, again, people will worry, well, if she doesn't go to an Ivy League school, is she going to get into dental school? This is up to her. She's going to have to work. She's going to have to work hard anyway, but she's going to have to work hard. And there's just a moment where a student coming out of a less important school is so compelling that there's not even a conversation. It's simple.
Yeah, that's her choice. Her make the decision then.
Yes, but I like, this is a good problem to have. This really is a good problem to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Yin. Thank you, Yin. Yeah, if you have more questions, would like to have a deeper understanding Kevin's coaching services. Like I said, right now it's about 11:05. We're about closing the presentation tonight. And thank you very much for everyone still stay with us, asking great questions. I think there's many good questions tonight. And thank you, Kevin, again, for your wonderful presentation and knowledge sharing and for your effort behind the scene. And also thank you, Allison, for assisting technical support on behind the scene and also clarify some of the questions for the parents. And once again, if you would like to have a free 30 minutes inquiry meeting with the Kevin, please scan the barcode and me and Allison will follow up with you to schedule that meeting with the Kevin. And also if you are just wanted to watching all our presentation, scan the barcode on the left-hand side. That way you can stay in the information group, always watching for, every single week or month, the information's important counselor to come on to this platform to share their knowledge and background with us. Thanks again for everyone, and looking forward to have next session. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night. Take care.
Good night. Good night, Kevin. Thank you.